about when there's a problem with the sale. When is the Mekach Taos Chal? Okay? In other words, at what point is the deal nullified? Do we say that right when the Mekach finds the mum, he finds the mum, and he decided in his own mind that right then and there, I am not accepting this item. I'm not taking it as is. I'm not interested in this. So, at that point, the Mekach is batal. The Mekach is batal. I'm not interested. Or is the Mekach only batal once the buyer communicates that with the seller? Or more so, let's say, once the buyer returns the item to the seller. You know, is the Mekach Taos when you bring back the item, or at least you make the item available for the seller, let's say. But the point is, you're communicating with the seller, you're telling him, look, I don't want it, here, take your item back, give me back the money. So it's only a Mekach Taos once you tell him, take back your item, or is the Mekach Taos really from the moment that you don't like the item? What? So we're only 3 minutes into the shir, and there's a whole shir now. The whole shir is gonna what?
Gets damaged.
Yeah, there's a lot of nafkaminas. So let's see Sif Chav Beis. Sif Chav Beis. So it says like this: Halokeach Mekach. If you buy an item, v'nimtza boi mum, and there's a mum there, v'achar kach, and after you find the mum, before you returned it, avad oinignav, it got stolen or lost. Harehu b'shus halokeach. It's the lokeach, the buyer's responsibility. Ad sheyachzir hamekach lamoicher. Until he actually returns the item, he's responsible for the loss damage to the item. Even though you saw the mum already. So he saw the mum, he decided already in his mind, I don't like this. But until he returns it, the Shulchan Aruch says he's responsible for loss or damage to the item. Or neither. We'll see. But if the damage happened because there's a problem with the item itself, the item itself is like spoiled or something like that. The item itself is problematic. So then, and the reason I can't return it to you is because the item itself spoiled. Then, if you had a chance to tell him and you didn't, then it's Lokech's fault. So, let's analyze this halacha. We're going to go first with the pshat of the nesivis and the pshat of the lavush. They say like this: immediately when there's a problem with the item, and you notice the problem with the item, then right away, there's the Mekach is batal. The Mekach is batal, and it becomes the item of the seller already. Once the moicher decides, once the moicher decides that, I mean, look, it's not like we're in some pristine atmosphere over here. But anyway, so once the moicher and once the lokech sees the mum, the buyer, right, finds the mum, immediately the sale is nullified. Even before he communicated that to the seller. But now he is holding the seller's item. So like Menashe said, he's going to be a shomer sachar. Okay? So he's going to be a shomer sachar on the item. That means he has responsibility towards the item, but it's not his anymore. It already belongs to the seller. Because he already decided he doesn't like it. It already belongs to the seller, but he's a shomer sachar. Shomer sachar means a paid watchman. Why is he considered a paid watchman? Maybe he should be called like a free watchman. A free person that watches it for free is not chayiv on gneva v'aveda. So why is he considered a paid watchman? Why is he shomer sachar? Because he has some benefit of holding on to the item. What's the benefit? That he has the whole upside here. Because since he didn't communicate it to the seller yet, the Nesivus explains, if he would decide that let's say the item goes up all of a sudden in value, and even with the mum, it's still more valuable than it was when he bought it. Right? So maybe he'll decide to keep it. So he has the upside on this. Since he has an upside here, he's like a shomer sachar, and that's why he's chayiv. Okay? So, again, right when he finds the mum, the sale is nullified. Now he's like a shomer sachar, he's responsible. If something happens to the item that's beyond his control, or it's the fault of the seller, because the item has in it, let's say it was a cheese, and by the time you give it back to him, the whole thing's spoiled, that's the seller's fault. You sold me a bad item, that's why it's spoiled, I can't give it back to you. We had many cases like that, that the buyer can't return the item because, let's say the seeds we learned last week. I planted the seeds, they didn't sprout because they were bad seeds. Well, what do you want me to do, get back the seeds for you? They're in the ground, they're gone. I can't give them back to you. But all that's the seller's fault. But if there's something that's not the seller's fault, and the buyer could have avoided it, either could have told him come pick it up, or the buyer, it's under the buyer's responsibility of shmira, then the buyer's chayiv. Okay? But let's bring out the nakuda. According
you said that from the moment he discovers the loan, it's no longer his. It's the seller's. And
correct. Because the sale is nullified because it's a mum.
So let's say the item does go up in price. Raises some crazy situation. It's still not his.
No, but he has some because he didn't communicate it with it, he could still be mekayim the Mekach.
That's not honest.
It's not honest to sell him a bad item with a mum in it.
Right.
So the point is, he was nisanet. No.
He has a right of return.
He's the nisane. He's the victim over here. So the Torah says, since you're the victim, right when you find the mum, basically we look at it like it's nullified. But you could decide to keep it later if you decide that it's to your benefit, because he's the victim of the sale, of the trickery here, of the mum. That's it. Now the Nesivus points out a very important halacha according to this. Let's say the item you paid $100 for the item, right? Now you paid $100 for the item, assuming that the item is mum free. So you paid. Turns out that it had a mum. So how much is the item worth? $75, let's say, right? The item's worth $75. So now we said that there's a mum, but you're still chayiv because you're like a shomer, right? How much are you chayiv to pay him back? Now that you can't return them, you pay him. Do you pay him? Does he keep the whole $100, or do you only have to pay him back 75 because that's the value of the item that you were mazik? Because essentially your chiv is a chiv shmira. So really, two things happen simultaneously. Really, what happens is the sale is nullified, so he owes you back your full money, $100. You now are a shomer on his item, but his item's only worth 75. So now, if the item gets lost or damaged, you only have to pay him back $75. So the buyer would end up getting back $25. You see what I'm saying? What?
It's like that, he has to pay money back 75. Is that the order?
That's what the Nesivus says. And so it's a little bit lav dafka in the Lashon, because if you look at the Lashon, it says Harei hu b'rshus lokeach. Sounds like the item is still under the full responsibility of the lokeach. It's not really true. It's only the item at its current value, not the value of the money that you spent on it. Okay, so that is the way that some learn the Nesivus and the Lavush, and therefore you're shomer ad shiachzir until you return it back. In the Sma doesn't seem to learn like this. There's a few diukim in the Sma that doesn't learn like this. The main diuk is that the Sma holds that what happens if, what's the nature of the chiyuv here? You found the mum, and you waited 2-3 days to tell him. Then it gets stolen, right? So what's the claim of the buyer? What's the claim of the seller onto the buyer?
You should have told me sooner.
Is the claim, hey, you should have told me sooner. I would have come picked it up. You live in a bad neighborhood. You know, I know. I didn't want to leave it by you I didn't want to leave it by you. You waited 2-3 days to tell me. So why'd you do that for? So Mamela, I could have picked it up. That's how the Sma learns. But the Sma said, according to the Nesivis and the Levush, that's not the point. The point is not because I could have picked it up earlier, not picked it up earlier. The point is that once you don't like it, once the buyer doesn't like it, it's a mafreya. But the Sma doesn't say that. The Sma says it depends on if the buyer could have told the seller earlier and avoided this situation. You understand? It's only if the buyer could have told the seller and the seller could have avoided the situation, that's why it got stolen. So the question is, why does it have to do with that? What's the shaykhis? So, based on, there's a vart here from Rabbi Zalman. I don't know if you put that in there or didn't put it in there, but Rabbi Zalman Meltzer and the Evan Ozel has a beer in the Sma. What? Okay, I need one.
Here.
Huh? Do you have the saver? Okay. So basically, he says like this. I'm just going to read it inside, then we'll explain it in the context we're learning. But he has a whole new yisoid in the whole Mekach Taos. So we're learning the whole Zman Mekach Taos. The Rabbi Zalman now explains the yisoid in the whole thing. The whole concept of a Mekach Taos, when there's a mum, it's not that it's a one-way thing. It's not that the buyer has a claim on the seller, give me back my money. And the moicher is like, okay, he's at a loss. He has to go find this thing. Ella, rather, the seller is not obligated to the Mekach Taos. He does not have to honor the Mekach Taos, unless the buyer makes the Mekach available to the seller. He says you have to return it. I don't think you have to return it, but you have to make it available for the seller. So in other words, it's like more like what we're used to, a return concept. You return it. You can't call up a store that had a mum. Okay, so bring it back. No, I got rid of it. Bring it back and return your money. You have a return policy, right? According to the Levush and the Nesivis, we said it's not a return policy. It's a Mekach Taos. You messed me up. The second I see that the item is messed up, I get my money back. No, I'm not a shomer. But the transaction is nullified. It's a one-way a transaction, the Mekach Taos. It's a one-way thing. Once the buyer sees that it's a problem, it's fully in his possession, in his rights to nullify the deal. According to the Nesivitz, it's a two-way deal. According to the Rabbi Zalman, you have to go back to the seller, make the item available to him, and say, "Look, I don't want it. Take it back and give me back my money." So it's a whole different type of idea. It's more like a return policy where if it has a mum, give it back to me, or at least make it available for me. So based on that, when is the Mekach Taos chal? Is it chal when the buyer finds the mum, or is it chal only when at least he communicates it to the seller and he says, "Hey, there's a problem here, and your item's here. It's waiting on my corner." I don't know if the tircha of the returning is on the buyer. It could be on the seller, but he's making it available for him. He said, "Look, it's right here. Send one of your guys to pick it up, and it's available for you." So according to the Rabbi Zalman, which we're going to say is pshat in the Sma, the Mekach Taos only chal once there's a communication between the two parties. And you tell him, "I don't like it, it's available for you," and then you can come pick it up. So according to the Sma, how do you learn the sif? The sif is, if the buyer buys something, he finds a mum, and then it got stolen, and he adds the Sma, you could have avoided that. You could have told him, you waited around, and that's why it got stolen. So now you're going to come to him and say, "Hey, okay, there was a mum." Fine. So what does the seller respond? Give me back the item. He says, "Well, I waited around, it got stolen." Meanwhile, well, sorry. If you can't give me back the item, then I'm not giving back your money. Period. Okay? So that's what according to the reading of the Sema, there's two differences between the Nesivis and the Sema. One is that it only works if the assumption of the Sema is that way, is if the buyer would have told the seller earlier, he could have avoided this situation. But if no matter what would have happened, this is kind of like something out of his control would have happened, or no matter what, it's not his fault. So then he doesn't have this problem necessarily, because let's say the same way that In other words, it got stolen, but right away, that's when I noticed the mum. So you sold me something I couldn't have returned to you no matter what I did. So then that's considered the problem of the seller. So if the reason why I can't return it is the seller's fault, let's say the case of the seeds, or the case of a treifa, or the case of the mum is from the thing itself, or we're adding, it happened so quickly, I couldn't find the mum, and by the time I found the mum, it was stolen, that's all considered the seller's fault. But if you found the mum and you waited around, then you could have avoided it, and now by the time you come to return it is gone, then the seller does not have to honor the Mekach Taos. Okay? So if you read the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, it's much better like the Sma. Because look what it says. The item is in the Rishus Lokech. So let's bring out the point. Remember our case? The buyer bought it for $100. Then they see the mum, really it's only worth $75. Then it gets stolen. How much? So we're saying it's stolen, it's the problem, it's the responsibility of the Lokeach. It's the responsibility of the buyer, right? So he goes back to the seller now, it got stolen. He tells the seller, hey, your thing got stolen. So the seller says, well, fine, so it's your responsibility. So according to the Sma, according to the Nesivos, what do we say? There's two separate things going on here. Number one is that the buyer is going to tell the seller, look, you sold me a faulty item, I want my $100 back. The seller's going to tell the buyer, yeah, but it was worth $75, and you were posheya, so give me back $25. So at the end, the seller's going to stay with the $25. But according to the Smaz Pshat, the Mekach Taos, if he got stolen and it's the buyer's fault, he doesn't get back anything. He can't. There's no Mekach Taos. He doesn't get back anything. So all the money that he spent, he can't claim Mekach Taos. So this is a very, very big difference how you understand the lumdus here, right? In other words, according to this Rabbi Zalman, it comes out that the whole zchus of the buyer to claim Mekach Taos is only if he presents the item back to the seller and he gives him a valid opportunity to say, here's your item. And if he doesn't do that, he can't claim the Mekach Taos and he loses all of his original money. According to the Nesivos, he's only obligated to pay the value he only loses the value of the item that it's actually worth. But the money that he paid above and beyond that, he gets back. Okay? It's a little bit of a tricky nafkamina. But
makes more sense.
What?
The Sma makes more sense.
According to our way of understanding Mekach Taos, we're accustomed to the Sma's way. Because we're more used to like a return concept. I return it to you. But in reality, in Lumdis, you could hear the Nesivos also, because the Nesivos is saying there's a moment, it's not a valid sale, period. It's over. The whole rest of the thing is a side point.
What's the value of the item? Has that have really anything to do with it? Don't you just get compensated what you paid, period?
No, that's what I'm saying. According to the...
Oh, you do, but you owe for the damage.
But then you lost it in transit, right? So if you lost it, you only are chayiv the buyer's only chayiv to pay back the seller the amount that the item is actually worth.
If you brought it back then.
Right.
If you didn't bring it back then.
No.
If you would have brought it back.
Right.
Okay?
But if you don't bring it back, you have a claim.
We're saying that the buyer is responsible even if he found the mum and then it gets lost or damaged before he's able to return it. So it's the responsibility of the buyer. That's what we're saying. But the nature of the responsibility depends on how you learn this. Is the pshat that since I can't return it to you, so the sale's final, so then the buyer won't get back any money? Or no, the sale's not final, but you damaged his thing. But then you only have to evaluate the value of the item, what it was worth at the time that you damaged it, or that you were negligent on it. So it's worth less than what you paid. So that difference you would get back.
But who would ever do that? If
I mean,
they get their item back, you know?
No, you give it back. What do you mean?
No, I thought it got lost.
Oh, it got lost, but now you can't give it back because it got lost.
That's
Yeah,
no
so
problem.
there's no Mekach Taos.
That's what we're saying. That
Right,
depends.
but how much money do you have to give the guy back?
That's what we're saying. No, according to the Sma, there's no Mekach Taos. But according to the other way to go, you're saying like him. What's the concept of Mekach Taos when you don't give back the item? That's what I'm saying, because we're used to that Walmart idea where you stand online, you return it, the Amazon, you send it back. But really, halachically, what is giving it back? The two separate things. One is that you
There's always times that you can't bring it back. The case of the seeds, even in
No,
this-
that,
this-
they say you can't,
Even-
because you caused
Whenever
it.
it's
That
clearly
was the seller's
whenever it's
fault.
clearly the seller's fault that you can't return it back, then you get it back. Let's say you bought food and the food is spoiled. You can't bring it back. There are definitely cases that you can claim Mekach tois and it's a spoiled food and you can't bring it back to them, right? So there's definitely cases of Mekach tois where you, regardless, even if you can't bring it back, it would still be that way.
So the value would be pretty much nothing if it's spoiled.
In that case, yeah.
Right, so you have to work.
But again, that would be a very important case. Let's say you could have brought it back. It was on the way. It wasn't perfect quality. Now you could have brought it back to them quickly, and he could have resold it as at a lower quality. And now you didn't. Right? So you know what happens. That's really what we're talking about. Okay? So this is a very, very big difference between the two ways of learning. Now, the Sma also says that you don't have to actually return it. You just have to make it available for him to return. Okay. Now, the next case that the Sma and the here, the next case that the Sma and the Nesivos argue is back in Sif Chaf Aleph. So you have it. It's on the first page, and it's after the Ramah. Sif Chaf Aleph. It's by the Mem Tes Lamed Beis. There, it's the last thin line of the Shulchan Aruch. It says, "V'im ha'idiyai shu koine." No, actually, first wide line. The case that we're talking about, and this gets involved in shipping expenses and all these types of things. What happens if you bought an item, you took it with you, you needed something, you took it with you to Eretz Yisrael, you get there, you take it out of the package, there's a mum. Right? Now you want to get your money back. So first question is, who has to pay the shipping back? Assuming that you have to give it back to him, who pays the shipping back? But more than that, it's much less likely that the moicher, that the seller, is going to be able to go get the item, right? So now the nature of the responsibility of the seller could change here, and the buyer. So the Shulchan Aruch says like this: Im halokech mekach mechaver. You bought something from your friend. You told him you're taking it with you somewhere. So the minute you told him that, why were you telling him that? Why is it his business? Why are you telling him that you took it, you're planning on taking it with you, you're not planning on taking it with you? What's the difference? The seller can't say, well, bring it back. Because once the buyer told the seller, I'm planning on taking it with me, the assumption is that what he's trying to do is shift the responsibility and say, look, I'm taking it far away. I'm not planning on bringing this back. You better make sure that this item has no mum at all. Because I'm traveling. I need it to be in its good condition. And if I'm traveling, I'm not going to be able to bring it back to you. So he's now shifted the responsibility back to the seller. So, so there's no claim that you should bring it back to me. And the seller has to give him his full cash back. And the seller metapel, he has to pay for the shipping to get it back to him. Here the halacha changes. That here, if it got lost or stolen before the return, then it's on the seller, it's not on the buyer. Here, it's on the seller, not on the buyer. So I found the mum, and the seller's going to have to come pick it up, and now, all of a sudden, he's putter. He doesn't have to pay anymore if it got lost or stolen. So the question is, why not? So why not? So it's in it. So this would depend on the two pshatim. If you go with the Nesivos and the Sma, and the Nesivos and the Lavosh, so the Mekach tois is automatic once I find the mum. But normally, I'm a shomer sachar. And why am I shomer sachar? Because it's my responsibility to bring it back to you. But here, I don't have responsibility to bring it back to you. So basically, over here, my responsibility is over. I told you beferish, I'm not taking responsibility on this item. By me telling you that I'm taking it with me, I took no responsibility on the item. I'm letting you know that it better be in mint condition. If it's not in mint condition, I'm just going to leave it here. You send someone to pick it up, but I'm done. So therefore, he's not a shomer sachar, he's a shomer chinam now. He has no responsibilities to the item. Not only that, the seller has to pay for the shipping expenses back. But according to the Sma, it's a little bit more tricky because at the end of the day, Mekach Taos is only when you return the item. So if you're far away, you're not returning the item. So how you making the Mekach Taos take effect? So basically, what you have to say is that you told him with enough time that he can come get it from you. It's also, it doesn't really change. According to him, according to the Sma, it's also talking about a case that you let him know, basically. You have to be guris achar she'odiyah. So it's a little different in that case. Okay? But what you see from here is this halacha that once you told him that you are planning to take it with you, then definitely everyone holds that the expenses to bring it back are on the seller. B'derech klal, it's not clear. B'derech klal, you have to make it available for him. Who pays l'maisa for the shipping back? If the deal is...
Seller has to agree to it as well.
What?
Seller has to agree to it as well, that you're pushing back the responsibility.
If you tell them that
Well, you told him, look, I'm going to Israel with the item.
You just test it out now. If it doesn't work, then we'll see right now.
It's a 220 plug.
You should be responsible if something goes out of the country, a month later, we'll be back.
And the seller should say that at the time of the.
Right. The
purchase.
seller didn't say. The seller's quiet.
I'm not selling it to you then. I'm not.
Right. Look, I can only deal with people here. You're going to be over there. If there's a problem, you're going to come back to me. I don't want to deal with this.
Or you can say it's an as a sale, you can take it back.
Or he says, look, test it out before. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not taking it back. But if he knew that the guy was planning on going, and he didn't say anything, then he's now taking the responsibility to get it back. And according to the Sma, you're not a shomer sachar at all. According to the Nesivos, you're not a shomer sachar anymore. And according to the Sma, you still have to tell the seller. You still have to tell him.
According to the Sma, there's no difference whether you take it to Medina Sayyam. The only
Right.
difference is that if you take it to Medina Sayyam, and you tell the person you take it to Medina Sayyam, it's the seller's responsibility to pick it up from Medina Sayyam.
Right, but as far as when the Mekach Taos takes effect, it still takes effect when you tell him. So according to the Sma, you still have to let the guy know. Once you let him know, then it's considered, I told you, and you can come get it if you want.
Well, without him saying that he's taking it to Medina Sayyam, we would never say that that's considered making it available for
Correct.
So you need that.
Yeah, correct. That's going to be the safe of the din. If you didn't tell him, then that's the safe of the din. Oh no, by the way, does the seller have to reimburse the buyer? This is very important. Does the seller have to reimburse the buyer for the shipping expenses there? I have a conference in London. I'm bringing all these things to go sell cameras in London. I go there and all the cameras are defective. But in the meanwhile, I paid shipping. The buyer paid the shipping expenses to bring the stuff abroad. Now, to ship the stuff back, that we already said is on the seller. What about the expenses of...
It's not responsible how the buyer wants to get it.
No, but I told you that I'm shipping it. I told you that. That's the whole thing. I told you that I'm going to take them. So what are you making me go through this whole tircha if there was a mum there?
Just tell me when the Mekach Taos was made.
No, this is without Mekach. This is a different type of chiyuv. This is a chiyuv of grama. This is more a chiyuv of, does the seller, we learned last week that the seller doesn't have to reimburse the buyer, let's say, for the seeds. He only has to reimburse it for the seeds, not for all the work that went involved in planting the seeds. But here, if you continue in the Shulchan Aruch, it actually says a chiddush. Im hayamoicher yedea b'memkar shahaya b'mum, chayiv b'itza shoitzi alkech lo'ilach oiseh mekach l'makom ploni. Im lo yedea shahaya b'mum potter. So I'm not exactly sure how that stems with the halacha we learned last week, but he says here that it's garmi over here. It's worse than over there. That for some reason here, if the seller knew that there was a mum, and he didn't say anything, then not only does he have to pay for the shipping back, he has to reimburse the buyer for his shipping expenses there.
The consequential damage.
It's a more, I guess for some reason, that's...
He knew the moon was there l'chachila.
He knew the moon was there l'chatchil. So does that...
That's the nafkamina.
What? I guess in the case before also it's telling me he didn't know that the seeds were no good. How are you supposed to know
How
that
do
the
you
seeds
know?
are not going to be good? Right. But if you knew, because that's one of the kolim and garmi, that if you knew that it was not good and you sold it to me anyway, and I told you I was going to Medina Sayyam, then the seller has to reimburse him for his expenses as well. How's that in the in whatever? It doesn't make a difference because there's going to be a contract.
It's all going to be in the contract.
I told you I'm getting it to Medina Sayyam. You didn't think I was going to put 200 cameras in my backpack. I'm saying, I don't think you have to tell him how much you're paying per pallet of shipping. I don't think that's the point.
It's normal, whatever's normal.
Whatever's normal. So you have to reimburse that.
Yeah, if the guy spent 3 times more than it should have cost,
Right,
you don't gotta pay him that.
right.
It's a
Right.
normal cost.
It's a normal cost.
Normal shipping.
But if the seller did not know about it, then he doesn't have to pay. Because then it's considered garmi, and he wasn't considered being mazik and biyadayim. It's not considered a hezek biyadayim. Okay? Okay, but that's an extra point. But what happens if the buyer didn't tell the seller that he plans on taking it abroad? So that's the end of the sif. And he took it there. Now it's a regular case. Now it's all on the buyer. So now, like the sma, Mekach only kicks in when the buyer tells the seller about the problem and makes it available to him. So you can't call me up from Israel and say, hey, I want my money back. There's a problem with the phone you sold me. Okay, so bring it back to me. No, but I'm in Israel. Okay, but you didn't tell me you're going there. So now the responsibility shifts back to the seller and the buyer. It's like a regular case where, according to the Sma, the Mekach only takes effect when the buyer makes it available back to the seller. So that's why it says here, which the Sma says in the Gimel, what it means, it doesn't have to mean you have to actually give it to him. You have to bring it back to my city and make it available for me. So that means, according to the Sma, the difference between Medina Sayyam and not Medina Sayyam is that the only way to make a Mekach Tois is when the buyer makes it back available to the seller. So, if you make it back available to him, that's easier for him to pick up. Right. So if the buyer didn't tell the seller that he's taking it far away, then the responsibility remains the same. He has to come back to the city, make it available, and then the Mekach Tois takes effect. But before that, he would have all the responsibility on the item. It's like his. And if he can't return it, then he doesn't get his money back. But if he told him he's going abroad, now the responsibility shifts to the seller, and then all the buyer has to do is say, hey, seller, come pick it up.
And this is true even if the seller knew if it was a month?
Yeah.
They're like fraud.
Well, what?
You might have to pay for
Maybe there's no, depends, yeah, but it would be the same. It would be still on the responsibility of the buyer to call up and say, there's 2 different types of mum. There's some mum that not everyone's makbid on. There's some women that make it totally unusable. But look, there's a little dent. I hit it over. You could bring it back, but Mashenke, and according to the Nesivis, the way we're saying is that the sale is final, and I'm a shoymer. If the buyer didn't tell the seller he's going abroad, so the halacha remains the same. He's a shoymer until he returns it. But if he did tell me he's abroad, basically he's telling him, look, I'm not going to be a shoymer. I'm going to take it abroad. If there's a problem, it's on you. And then the halacha would be that it's on him. And either way, the shipping back is on the buyer. The shipping back is on the seller. But to reimburse for the shipping expenses.
Well, the nafkamina be what the damage happens before you tell them.
What?
The nafkamina is if the damage happens before I can tell the seller. In the case where I go to Medina Sayyam. That's the nafkamina.
Nafkamina is the damage happened before I got a chance to tell him. Because according to the Sma, I didn't tell him yet.
I don't have to tell them. According to the Sma, I have to tell them.
Right.
According to the Nesivis,
I don't have to tell
it's
them.
automatic. And if I tell you, hey, it was damaged, it was in there. It was in Yerushalayim 3 months ago when I came back by boat, and I don't know where it's going to be now. I left it in some backyard. It's probably not there anymore.
Right.
It doesn't make a difference. I wasn't.
Well, you can't be posheh. I mean, you have to put it in a place that's safe.
But
Because you're still shemachinam. You're still shemachinam. You can't be posheh. But so that would be the halacha. So basically, after learning the whole Mekach Tois, so this exact point is a very interesting machlokes that comes out from the Achronim between the Nesivis and Rabbi Zalman, which we're saying is really machlokes is the Lavush and the Sma, which basically is really what is the whole mechanics of the Mekach Tois? Is it that alone that the Lokech is not happy with the item? the buyer sees it, he's not happy. It's a unilateral type of transaction where if the buyer's not happy, that nullifies the sale retroactively, and now he just retains a status of a shomer. Or is the idea of Mekach Taos that you could come back with the item and you could basically get back your money as long as you give him back your money, much more responsibility to provide the item, to give it back to the seller, and that would be the smaz. Like we said, the difference is how much money would you get back? Okay, fine. So I think that pretty much wraps up this siman. Like I said, next week is going to be Purim, and then after that maybe we'll do Mechiras Chametz, or we'll do some other sugya that relates to Pesach. And there's one sugya here that relates to Pesach, which maybe we'll touch on, is what happened if you rented a house. It's a big sugya.
That's a good sugya.
If you rented a house
So
for
common
Pesach,
nowadays.
and you show up to the house, and it's not clean for Pesach. The person didn't do b'dikas
Well,
chametz.
even if it is clean, you gotta clean it again, you gotta.
He didn't do the b'dika. He didn't do the b'dika. The case of the Gemara, he didn't do the b'dika. So does that create a Mekach Taos? Or since it's a mitzvah, so he's allowed to say, no, like a mezuzah. I thought you wanted to do the mitzvah yourself. I didn't know you wanted me to do the mitzvah for you.
You can't put it in the
So,
contract.
put it in the contract. So anyway, that's the whole sugya that we may touch on. And okay, so I will say we with Mr. Khan over here. We're working on together with H3 in H3, which is a good. You want to explain it? It's a conference that takes place in Chicago, and now there's like regional conferences around the country and in a few other places internationally as well, basically where business people come together, and it's a networking conference, which is the point of it is to uplift one's business, and it's shiurim, and it's a lot of food networking, and uplifting one's business to be run a business like a Ben Torah. So it was really with the help of some of the people locally, we were able to help convince them bring it down here to Florida. It's taking place April 4th, and you can register. It's going to be a very, very exciting event. First time here in Florida, Mitzvah Hashem. We'll be able to make it a Kiddush Hashem for everyone. Okay.
So you finally really worked out the
Yeah. I finally worked that out. It took a while.
Funny.
I put in an hour and a half or 2 hours with David.
So it's funny, I was saying to my son-in-law, like I felt bad,
Like,
like,
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to learn off my Blejer. He said, don't worry, he'll be much better off with that.